Good morning, or afternoon, or evening. So I want to continue with a few more paragraphs of my essay about Mr. Norman Finkelstein. So let's just get right to it. I'm going to start from like 2 or 3 sentences before this part. So, okay. Basically, we were saying how Norman Finkelstein is either out of touch or intentionally leaves out crucial and relevant facts. So one of those facts, which of course I'm sure he loves to highlight, is the poverty rate of 50% in Gaza, or at minimum 50%, which of course this was pre-October 7th. Post and now currently after October the 7th, I'm sure it's skyrocketed well over 50%. Of course, he blames Israel entirely for this reason, which is really just a lazy argument at the very best. Most people don't want to admit this. I don't know whether Norm would ever admit this. However, they're not really interested when it comes to Arab on Arab oppression. They're much more interested when it comes to Jewish or Israeli on Arab oppression. And, you know, the media certainly likes to reflect this kind of a disparity. So let's explore that more, shall we? Those who want to, quote, free Palestine often view Gaza as a, quote unquote, open air prison. Because, well, let's face it, it's much easier to want to destroy the, quote, oppressor if those are the conditions that they've created for the, quote, oppressed. Now, Egypt, of course, also shares a border with Gaza, and this is something that most anti-Israeli writers, like Finkelstein himself, conveniently avoid discussing. Now, Israel and Egypt imposed their blockade on Gaza in 2007, 2 years after Israelis completely vacated the Gaza Strip. So this blockade was put up in direct response to terrorist attacks that Hamas started staging right upon their winning of elections and ousting Fatah, the prior dominant party, which was then pushed to the West Bank. Now, of course, the blockade was initially set up to prevent violence and chaos in that specific region. And, you know, many view that the partition wall that they put up earlier as another method to just oppress the Palestinians and make life just horrible and extremely difficult for them intentionally. That their thinking should predate 2023, but sadly, these young and developing minds lack the historic knowledge and the context necessary to understand why there is a quote-unquote conflict. Now, there's no doubt that life for Palestinians is difficult, but it is that life is difficult and why life is difficult. These are two very different things. Ever since the partition wall went up, suicide bombings decreased by almost 95%. To argue that the wall was not put up to prevent terrorist attacks is a faulty argument. Now, on the other hand, the, quote, genocide argument is not just a stretch, it's an outright lie. And Norman Finkelstein is one of the best at repeating it. Therefore, writers with more developed minds are forced to unpack the nonsense. So throughout the history of what we call genocide, generally what will happen is the ethnic population is diminished or nearly eradicated. As Norm well knows, this is precisely what happened during World War II, during which time the Jewish population in Europe was decreased by about 66%. To clarify, that is 2 out of 3 people. How then is it possible that in the case of Gaza, its population has increased from approximately 1.5 million in 2010 to 2.1 million in 2023? Is it possible that the genocide people are speaking of is some evil Zionist plan to kill every Palestinian off very slowly, so by the time we are in the year 2050, there will only be about 100 living Palestinians? I find that very hard to believe, but if this theory has any credibility, well, then it would certainly provide the Palestinians with plenty of time to get organized and fight against the Israelis to prevent their eventual extinction. Now, that's obviously not meant to be a serious prediction, but, excuse me, sincere people do not want to believe that Israelis are committing a genocide. Those who do believe it are either brainwashed, anti-Semitic, or both. That's the mental illness from which Mr. Finkelstein suffers. It's a specific kind of anti-Semitism that comes in the form of indoctrination. Now, back on planet Earth, Gazan mothers typically have, at minimum, 3 babies, so naturally the population has grown in the last 12 to 13 years. That's kind of how population growth works, even after many periods of warfare. With a larger population today, the threat of Hamas is that much stronger due to the years of educating Gazan kids to hate and kill Jews for the quote-unquote Palestinian cause. But while Gaza's population has grown, bordering countries are responding by not helping Palestinians, but by rather increasing their security measures against them. Take Egypt. The Egyptians have been building a wall for the last few months at the Rafah border crossing. They do not want Palestinians entering their country. Since October the 7th, at least 1,300 Palestinians had fled from Gaza and into Egypt in search of medical treatment, which should be their moral and their legal right. Why doesn't Egypt take in more Palestinians? Well, because every time they have in the past, they are met with the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. Where the Palestinians go, so too follows terrorist attacks, and as we all know, most countries in the civilized world do not tolerate terrorist attacks. Egyptian President al-Sisi is preventing Palestinians from entering Egypt for this exact reason. So how come other Arab nations aren't taking in more Gazans? Surely they want to help too, right? No. Arab leaders have the audacity to state in public how much they care about and support the quote-unquote Palestinian cause, and yet they won't lift a hand to help a single one of them. They are no different from the United States Congress, as they throw lots of money at the Palestinians but do little to actually help them. Talk is cheap, and while these sympathizers are quick to pledge their support, they do nothing to help Palestinians achieve success, to achieve better access to things like education, food, medicine. That's enough for now, and I also want to add in conclusion that the following individuals are very soon going to risk losing their audience members, and those individuals, of course, are the platforms The Majority Report with Sam Seder, they continue to promote falsehoods and inaccurate reporting on the conflict, or war, really, in Gaza. The other one would be Katie Halper of the Katie Halper Show, or whatever unoriginal title. And then, of course, we have the one and only Owen Jones, who is merely an anti-Semitic propagandist, of course, trying to mask himself as an authentic journalist. I'll have more to come, and as always, appreciate you watching. Feel free to comment, write anything hateful or loving. I welcome it all, and I will see you on the next one.